The national letter of intent is going away, and a lot of other changes in recruiting. We'll talk about that next on the ProZone. Welcome to the ProZone. I'm Matt Roberts. So, the national letter of intent has been eliminated by the NCAA, effective pretty much immediately. What is a national letter of intent? National letter of intent is a letter. It started in 1964, so it's about 60 years old. And what it basically did is, as an athlete will commit to a school, you have your verbal commitments, which mean nothing. Verbal commitments mean nothing. I'll do a separate informational video on commitments, verbal commitments, but they don't mean anything. Yeah, you basically, the skinny of it is, you say, yes, I want to go to that school, and the school says, yes, we want you to commit, and then you commit, and then they can pull the deal and give it to somebody else if they want to, because nothing's legal and binding. And you also can pull the deal because nothing's legal and binding. Then you'd sign your national letter of intent on signing day. That was the big thing, a big celebration of signing day. So you sign your national letter of intent. That commits you to the school for a year. So you have a year of a scholarship. And at the end of that year, usually around January, but as late as July, the school can either honor or not honor your scholarship anymore, renew it or not renew it. So it could say, hey, you know what? We don't think you're meeting our requirements academically or athletically, so we're going to kind of let you go, and we're not going to give you your scholarship. There's no guaranteed 2, 3, 4-year deals with a national letter of intent. It's a year by year. Now, several years ago, I think about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe, the NCAA tried to vote, the ruling committee, the schools tried to vote on making it 2 years. That was voted down, and it stayed with 1. Well, now all hell broke loose with the transfer portal. All hell broke loose with name, image, and likeness. And that changed everything. It caught the NCAA on their heels. They knew it was coming. I mean, how you not see it, read the tea leaves on that and see it coming is beyond me. But they were caught. Meaning California passed legislation several years ago. I believe it was 2018. They passed legislation saying that, yes, athletes can receive name, image, and likeness deals in the state of California. Other states followed suit. You had about 30 some odd states, about 31, 33 states, something like that. It keeps changing, but you have 30 some odd states who agreed to pay name, image, and likeness. So what does that mean? That means, in brief, if a company wants an athlete to represent their company, their business, or if they want them to do a commercial, they can pay them for use of their image to market their materials. That's basically what it means. So name, image, and likeness became the thing. And the NCAA, they saw it, but they didn't clamp down at it early enough. So then everything went crazy. Then all of a sudden you had the transfer portal happen. Now, what was the transfer portal? In the past, again, in brief, I have a longer video. Episode 1, it's a 2-part episode basically, talks a lot about the transfer portal. Go check that out on our YouTube channel or here on X. So the transfer portal, basically it was, in the past, an athlete could transfer one time in their career, as long as they were athletically and academically qualified, and they got the release from the school. Then they would transfer to another school, and they'd have to sit out about a year, depending on which level they went. If they went from Division I to Division I, they'd have to sit out a year for competition purposes. A couple years ago, I think it was last year, 3 different athletes sued the NCAA and said, we want to transfer as many times as we want. The hell with the contract we signed with the National Letter of Intent. We want to transfer as many times as we want. NCAA said no. Basically an injunction was filed against the NCAA, and then they said you can't let anybody transfer unless you actually let these kids do it. So NCAA said, okay, you know what? The hell with it. We're just going to, instead of screwing up all the sports, we're just going to make it open season. You can transfer as many times as you want while we are dealing with this situation. And last year was insane. I think it was 7%. I believe I reported 7% of the entire Division I class in football had entered the transfer portal. It was like 1,098 kids or something like that. That's ridiculous. That was insanity. And everybody was entering the portal. Now, what did that mean? If you enter the portal, you lose your scholarship. So if you had a scholarship, you resign that scholarship by entering the portal. And then you got to hope you get picked up by another team. Other teams can recruit you from the portal, but it doesn't mean that they actually will recruit you. And then if you go back to your school after entering the portal, they may or may not have to bring you back. That was the negative side of the transfer portal, besides the chaos. So, so it got pretty insane. And there were 3 different windows for the portal. There was the first window, which was December to January. Okay. There was a second window, which occurred, this is for football, in April to March, or March to April, sorry. And then there was a third window, which would come up every time if a coach quit, fired, or retired, then any of the athletes signed under that coach could enter the transfer portal because they weren't signed by the original coach. I didn't agree with that in any way, shape, or form because, you know, you sign a contract as an adult to enter college. You're committing to a school and a team. Yeah, the coaches leave, but the pros can't just leave a team if their coach is fired. That's the difference. These kids want to be, you know, young athletes want to be, you know, treated like pros, paid like pros. They have to adhere to the same kind of rules as pros. Of course, we got pushback on that. I had people that would argue and they'd say, well, the coach can leave. Why can't the kids just leave? And the coach don't pay a penalty, but the coaches do pay a penalty. If a coach leaves a school, okay, goes to another school, that coach has to pay a separation cost for their contract, basically. It's like anywhere from $750,000 to up to $3 or $4 million, depending on the contract, okay? So if that coach left, then they have to pay that. Or, and in most cases it was the case, if they're hired by another school, then that school would pay out the coach's contract. Like DeBoer from Alabama, went from Washington to Alabama. Clearly, most likely, Alabama paid out the rest of his contract to Washington. That's most likely what happened. So, you know, my take on that would be, well, if a kid wants to leave and pay back the tuition that the school paid for after he took that money in under good faith, right? And they gave it to him under good faith, then he should do that. But he or she should do that. Well, we're talking football, so we're saying he. So that never happened. Well, now everything got convoluted, and the NCAA had been playing catch-up for the longest time. They were caught on their heels with this, really screwed them up. And name, image, and likeness, you had organizations creating nil collectives, and nil collectives would pool their money, and basically it was pay for play. It was big donors who would donate big money like they did in the past, which was illegal. Now it was legal, all of a sudden legal. So a nil collective, a group of investors that would get together, or donors that would get together. A lot of your nil collectives were 501c3s, which is a nonprofit organization, and the 501c3 would then take money donated to them, which is a tax write-off for charitable donation. The no collective would take that money and then pay athletes to play for their team. And they make promises to athletes. Example, most recently, who was that young man? Matthew Sluka from UNLV. If you remember Matthew Sluka. Matthew Sluka, he was getting abused. And Sluka is one of the reasons why it's getting abused. We're like 4 games into the season. And Sluka, the starting quarterback, says, yeah, I didn't get my $100,000 that I was promised. I only got like $3,000 or $4,000 for my nil deal for the year. I'm going to quit, enter the transfer portal, and declare myself a red shirt. Well, you're violating your contract, your national letter of intent. You're violating that contract by doing so. But none of these athletes are held to account. Now, people will say, well, he was promised by a coach. I heard this online. He was promised $100,000 by the coach, and he didn't get that promise, and it's verbal commitment. Wrong. In the state of Nevada, if the promise is over $500, I think it's $500 or $600, then it's not a binding agreement. See, if someone says, hey, I'll give you $200, and they verbally agree to that, then that's enforceable. That's a verbal binding contract. But above 600? I think it is 600. Above 6, it doesn't count. So it doesn't fall under a verbal agreement. So all you people who were coming at me online back then and complaining, it was verbal. It wasn't a verbal binding agreement. You don't understand the law in this case. Look up Nevada law. So he was promised $100,000, I believe it was, from a coach. He didn't get that money. He signed the deal for $3,000 to $4,000 a year. You signed the deal as an adult. You are over 18, you signed the deal. Read the contract that you sign before you sign it. You can't be in the clear, say, oh, I didn't know. BS, you have the contract. And if you're going to make money, better hire a lawyer if you don't understand the contract to have them review it, or someone you trust to review that deal. So he signed the deal. He didn't, typical to the generation, he signed the deal. He didn't like the deal he signed, so he backed out of the deal. And that's the problem. When you have, I'm going to step back a bit, when you have parents that raise kids who to say you're not held accountable to anything, and they don't understand loyalty and they don't understand commitment, and they see it in the pros all the time. You have people like LeBron James who just bounces from team to team. Other players do the same thing. They bounce from team to team because they're not getting their way. They want to build their own team instead of sticking with a team like they used to do. Right? Like your classic athletes did. They'd stay with the team for most of their careers. I mean, Barry Sanders, for example. Barry Sanders could have left the Detroit Lions a long time before that. He had opportunities to leave. He chose not to leave. He stayed committed to the team that drafted him. That's called class. That's called loyalty. That's called commitment. Also, there's self-preservation, and I get it. And if your contract expires, okay, if your contract expires, then yes, you have the opportunity to, entertain other contracts. Now that brings us back to what's happening now. Okay, now we're back to it, right? We're talking contracts. Contracts were never honored. National letter of intent contracts were ignored by athletes all the time, especially since transfer portal became the Wild West. Now with the new rule from the NCAA, the national letter of intent going away. And that starts with the year 2025. So the kids graduating in 2025, you're not going to be signing a national letter of intent. You're going to be signing an agreement. Let me read an article here from Covington News. There's some nice coverage on this. A decision was made by the NCAA Division I Council on Wednesday, this is the 14th of October, to eliminate the national letter of intent program. The approval will come into effect immediately and will apply to the class of 2025 recruits. The NLI program was established in 1964. They go into history of that. Now we go to it. In its place will be a new financial aid agreement that will provide many of the same functions as a national letter of intent and will be tied to a contract related to an eventual revenue sharing model across college athletics. Interesting. So now you're getting a contract. So the change is believed to also reduce any confusion between the NLI provisions and the NCAA legislation, blah, 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 blah. So in other words, this new agreement is seen to provide more flexibility to schools and athletes. Student athletes will sign a contract now to play at their school of their choice and will no longer be tied to a one-year commitment that's established in the previous national letter of intent. You're signing a contract. Now that means, since the NLI was basically, since you ignored the rule enough and enough people, got out of the contract by backing out of it and it really wasn't enforceable, now they're going to have you sign contracts that are going to be enforceable. And if you think for a second, with all the litigation and the suits filed against the NCAA by the athletes, if you think for a second the NCAA is not going to hold you accountable to the contract that you sign and then take you to court if you breach, you're in for a rude awakening, because that's probably going to happen. If the NCAA has any collusions whatsoever, if they have any strength whatsoever, lack of a better term, then they will stand by this and enforce the contract because it's screwing everything up, okay? So, under the new guidelines, athletes in the transfer portal will be allowed to sign with a different school after they've officially entered the portal. Okay? Now, I'm not sure how that applies to the contract. Does the contract allow you to go into the portal? It says allowed to sign with different schools after they have officially entered the portal. Can you just walk away from your contract to enter the portal? I talked to the NCAA legal about this last week. They don't have an answer yet. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. After that athlete has signed their written offer of athletic aid from another school, other schools would be prohibited from recruiting communications. So if you enter a portal and then you sign an agreement with another school of financial aid, meaning a scholarship, then no one can touch you. So no more recruiting out of the portal once you've already committed to a school. That's what they're trying to clamp down on, okay? This change caused sentiment among college coaches that this will set a precedent for contracts between athletes and universities to be introduced as revenue sharing becomes more common in Division I. So that's the next question is revenue sharing. What is the revenue sharing? Okay. Revenue sharing, let me find that. There's an article here from Yahoo News. Okay, Yahoo Sports. All right. It says here, this was agreed upon, revenue sharing was agreed upon shortly before this. It's a figure set about $21 to $23 million annually for schools to distribute to its student athletes. Football, they're estimating is going to get 75 to 85% of that 21 to 23 million annually. Men's basketball, 10 to 15%, and then 10 to 15% scattered about the other sports that really aren't big revenue generating sports. So that's what that's coming down to. Let's look at the high numbers, say $23 million. Do some quick math here. 23 million times 85%, high end of both. Look at about $19 million, $19 million annually to football. How many players are on a football team? Well, they can have up to 105 scholarships now with the new rule. I'll discuss that in a second. 105 scholarships. Looking at about up to, doesn't mean it's guaranteed, but they have up to $186,000 per athlete, potentially. Now, you know and I know they're not all going to get that money. That money can be allocated among different athletes. So better athletes get more money. Lesser athletes who don't play as much get less money. What about someone who's a red shirt? Do they get paid? Are they paid like they're on a practice squad? Or because they're not part of the team, do they not get paid? We don't know yet. There's a lot of things we don't know, and I'm going to get into that. So that's the breakdown. That's where the revenue sharing comes from. Now, does that eliminate name, image, and likeness money? Well, keep tabs here. It also solves a big issue regarding no collectives, which has seen some schools dominate in recruiting because some schools have bigger no collectives than others. Okay, most athletes will see themselves make more money from revenue sharing than any other nil deal, and that's probably the case. There's certain ones who make a whole ton of money, but most of your athletes, if you look at the breakdown of name, image, and likeness money, nil money, you're looking at like some guys making $600, some make a couple thousand. Most of them don't get that much. Now you can guarantee players a lot more money from revenue sharing. Okay, and any non-university nil deal must be approved by a third-party clearinghouse. So now they're trying to put their claws into the nil to control that because it's been the Wild West for about a year, and they've been paying whatever they wanted to these athletes. You know, see, like I said, nil was supposed to be, we'll represent your brand, but the nil collectives took it and said, oh, you know what we'll do? We'll create a camp, and you'll volunteer to be the face of that camp, and then we'll pay you. And that's their way around it. They just kind of created something. And they make money on the camp as well, and then they, or they have a speech or a meeting, and then a meet and greet, and then the athlete shows up and they're paying him for that. That was their way around it. Well, now let's go through a third-party clearinghouse. What does that mean? We don't know yet. There's a whole lot of things we don't know. I asked the NCAA legal, I said, do scholarships still exist? Yes, they still exist. This is not going to replace scholarships. So you're going to get your money, your revenue sharing, in addition to your scholarship money. Now, is that every school? No, not at all. This model benefits power conference schools, of course, your big ones. However, your FCS schools and G5 schools, they will not want to distribute that amount of revenue to their athletes and will still be able to operate under the current amateurism rules. So you can opt out of that agreement, out of that revenue sharing agreement. Some schools that have the revenue will share it. Other schools that don't have the revenue will not. What does that give us? That gives us haves or have-nots. That's what the transfer portal also gives us. Haves versus the have-nots. Haves have the money to get the big athletes. Haves have the money to pay them big money, whether it be a big no collective in their pocket or big revenue sharing to dole out to the athletes so they can pay them a lot more to come into their school. Then they could pull that talent from the portal. The have-nots, the smaller your FCS schools, your smaller Division I schools, D2s, they're going to lose athletes to enter the portal in hopes of getting money from schools who have the money to provide to the athletes. So you're going to have a feast or famine. It's feast on the Division I big name side, famine on the other side. Is there still going to be talent there? Yeah, but I have a sneaking suspicion that the talent is going to be kind of weaned off over time because your big names are going to go to the big schools, and you guys who are kind of like on the fringe, they're undiscovered talents that may have that ability, but they're kind of close. They're going to end up at FCS schools. They're not going to, maybe Division IIs, because they're not good enough to generate revenue for the team. Therefore, they're not going to be getting paid. Does that make sense to you? Makes sense to me. So that's where it's headed, I think. What are the terms of the contract? NCAA legal? Doesn't know. How much money are they going to be paying? Is there a flat amount? No answer. They don't have an answer to that yet. I asked them a litany of questions as to what this entails. They don't know. So I'm like, wait a minute. So you're enforcing this starting on signing day. I think it's February. Well, let's take a look. When does it start? Okay. Looking at the rules. Okay. Well, let's touch into those rules. There was another change made back in June 4th. NCAA was having a little battle with Congress, the House of Representatives, and they decided to, in addition to the revenue sharing portion, they decided to, in the beginning of the 2025-2026 year, now that's not this year, that's a 2025-26, which is next year, okay? The sports scholarships rules will be eliminated, allowing teams to offer scholarships to the entirety of their rosters based on the House settlement terms, okay? So now a school can offer scholarships to everybody on their team, all right? Are you going to get a full 4-year deal? No. Well, but Matt, don't they offer scholarships already? Not always. A lot of preferred walk-ons there. A lot of people that can't offer scholarships to. Now they can offer it to everybody. There was a limitation on how many scholarships you got on a team, okay? There was a limit, how many you had and how many you can give out every year. Well, they've increased that number, okay? So football will see an increase of 20 scholarships. So they're going from 85 to 105 scholarships for football. Schools will not have to be at 105 limit once the season starts, but they'll be able to carry more players in preseason camps. So they can cut people in preseason, but they can offer a lot of scholarships, a lot more. Now, why are they doing that? Well, they're doing that because of transfer portal. Because when you have all these athletes that are earning the portal and they want to get a deal, they want to give them a deal. Well, let's explain it. We have a kid who's at a school who has played for 2 years at a different Division I school. He's got 2 years of experience, 2 years to show that he can handle the curriculum of college, 2 years of maturity, 2 years of physical development. Again, 2 years of experience. So he is more valuable to the college to take off the portal than it is to the experimental kid who's coming out of high school who may or may not make the cut. I've done recruiting for a long time. Titan Scouting, our recruiting service, I've marketed athletes for 20 years. And a lot of times, most of the time, it's peeled off now because of transfer portal. But a lot of times in January, around January, getting close to signing day, they're trying to fill in spots and looking for talent. And I would get a call or an email and say, hey, do you have any, usually it's offensive, defensive linemen or safeties. Do you have any of those? And I'll say, yeah, I got a few guys that I think can play Division I, and I throw them their way. And then their projects, in their case, are do they have the potential to do it? Do they have the option, like the option to grow into that role? And the answer is sometimes yes. So they give that kid who's not a bona fide D1 hot recruit an opportunity to play Division I, and they recruit them. We had a lot of athletes getting recruited that way. That was awesome for young kids. They don't have to do that anymore. That's why I'm telling my athletes now, if you're not a hot prospect, you're going to get passed over quickly. You have to work that much harder to market yourself, to get yourself exposure, which is what I do. I get athletes tons of exposure. Titan Scouting does that. So I give athletes massive exposure, get them on the radar of these schools so they know who they are, so they consider them in their list. And hopefully they see something there, and then they recruit the kid. Most of the time, the vast majority of the time, I mean, every athlete's going to get some interest. I've never had that fail yet. But here's what they're looking for. See, first off, they go re-recruiting of athletes that they want to keep on their roster. Then they go with transfer portal athletes. Then they go prep school JUCO, kind of one and the same. And then they go for high school athletes. That's how it works. Now, with more scholarships, they can go for more athletes, but it does not mean that they're reserving those 20 additional scholarships for high school athletes. They're reserving those 20 scholarships primarily to stack the deck from the transfer portal. So young athletes, you have to stand out even more. That's where someone like me comes in. You can contact me through X at RecruitBoss. You can contact me on our website if you want to. Go to titanscouting.com. And if you have questions, feel free. Ask questions. Instagram, RecruitBoss. I'm there as well, at RecruitBoss. So anyway, back to the scholarships. 85 to 105, again, they want to be able to offer smaller scholarships. 1 year, 2 year deals. That's what's now allowed with the scholarship increases. So you can have kids off the portal who have 2 years left. They can offer them a full 2 year scholarship to finish up the rest of their career at the school. And then they sign an agreement, and then they have a contract, and that's locked into that 2 years. Other schools that are receiving scholarships are basketball, going from 11.7 scholarships to 34. Baseball. Baseball from 11.7 scholarships to 34. So that's a nice increase for baseball. Basketball going from 13 to 15. Softball, 13 to adds 13 scholarships, going from 12 to 25. So that's good for softball athletes. I'm marketing a softball athlete now, a couple of them actually, trying to get them exposure from the colleges. And it's a good time to start younger. You have to start younger now. That's where I start them. I'm not sucking freshmen. If you're a varsity and you're playing, you're a sophomore, and you have some experience in you, then that's when we want to start marketing you. And that's what I'm good at. So, and volleyball will increase from 12 to 18. Those are your increases. Schools will not be forced to give the full scholarship numbers. This allows the school to offer grants, leave walk-on opportunities, as well as partial scholarships. There you go. There you go. So everything still kind of stays the same, but they've increased the number of scholarships. They're still going to do the walk-on, preferred walk-on stuff because it's very easy. Preferred walk-on, I can get a kid come to my team. If there's someone I might be interested in, but they're a project, I spend no money on them. They pay for the tuition. They can play on my team until I decide that maybe or not they're worth a scholarship. And then we go from there. They're not going to get rid of that, but they're going to be able to have more scholarships to pull kids off the portal and take care of them. So it says here, it continues on, the increase in scholarships are set to take place in the 2025-2026 academic calendar year. So that applies to this group here, this year. As more information comes out, schools and coaches will be assured to have varied option on the ruling. Now, what does that change in terms of the signing day? Signing days have changed as well. Let me find that in the article. Here we go. So we said signing day is usually February, right? First Tuesday in February, I believe it is. Okay. So how does the new NCAA ruling for partial scholarships, not partial scholarships, for the revenue sharing contract, the elimination of the national letter of intent, what does that change? Well, it says here, High school athletes will still be signing a binding agreement, as we discussed. The NCAA's legislative committee said these are the following dates for signing. Football. Early signing period begins on Wednesday following the last FBS, Division I FBS, regular season Division 1A, regular season game at 7 p.m. and will last through the upcoming Friday. The regular signing period begins at 7 a.m. on the first Wednesday of February. Okay, so that's changed, but it's February, it goes through Friday. Basketball, the early signing period begins at 7 a.m. on the second Wednesday of November through the upcoming Wednesday. The regular signing period begins the Wednesday in April, that is 1 week after the men's and women's championships have concluded. And then other sports, the signing period is 7 a.m. on the first Wednesday of November. That's it. Now, the other change that came with this is a change to the transfer portal. Along with the elimination of national letter of intent, the transfer portal has now changed. Instead of being 45 days for football and basketball transfers, it's reducing to 30 days. I always thought it was 30 days. I didn't know it was 45, but I guess it was 45 days. So it's 30 days now for the portal. So there's that. How does that apply to you as an athlete who's 2025 or later? Well, you're not going to sign a letter of intent. You're going to sign a contract now. How binding is it? We don't know. What are the terms? We don't know. How much money will you get? We don't know. Do the colleges have the answer yet? No. Do they have they been given guidelines of what they're supposed to do or what they're required to do? No. Do they have a language that's uniform across the board? No. And I was talking to NCAA legal. I'm like, what the hell is this? You guys are putting together, you implemented a new plan, and you only have about like 6 months to make this happen. So what are the rules? We don't know yet. I'm like, then why implement it? It's like putting new windshield wipers on a broken windshield. Why would you implement the plan but not have the plan in place? It doesn't make any sense. But that's what they're doing. It's like, let's go run a play, but we don't have a game plan. It doesn't make any sense at all. So, but that's where we're at right now. So everything's in flux. It's all changing, okay? So we have a new, in summary, we have the national letter of intent's gone. We have a new revenue sharing contract that you as an athlete will sign. Not all of you will have to. Some schools will not adhere to the revenue sharing of the deal, depending on the school. How much will they give you? That has yet to be determined. We kind of have an estimate, roughly up to about $186,000, possibly per athlete per year, possibly. But I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know. Are they going to put it into a trust? I'll tell you what. There's a proposed legislation called the College Athlete Protection Act. I will talk about that in a separate video as it applies to this. I think they might be trying this to kind of jump ahead of that. They didn't even know that existed until I called them about a year ago. I said, you guys know about Kappa, don't you? And they said, what's that? I'm like, you got to be kidding me. How do you do your research? I'm not even in the business of, I'm not in the NCAA, but I do my research. We'll talk about that later, but it's a revenue sharing model. There are certain aspects to it which I kind of like, but there's other aspects I don't. So I think they're kind of jumping ahead of that, but we'll talk about that more. I'll do another short episode or an update with that information in it, okay? You can look it up for yourselves right now, but it's interesting. So what does that mean to athletes? We don't know. Guys, you don't know. We don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't know what's going to happen yet. It's all in flux. So I'm waiting to hear back from the NCAA. I'm following the rules that come down. Oh, I forgot. One more additional fun thing. Yeah, the ruling with the NCAA versus the House of Representatives, or House versus the NCAA. Yeah, they had to agree, and this was interesting. There's a settlement, a damages settlement for athletes, for revenue sharing. So the shift from scholarship limits, right, and roster caps has to fund the $2.8 billion, $2.8 billion in back pay that are going to be paid to athletes. The athletes who competed in Division I football, or Division I sports, Division I athletes who competed from June 15th of 2016 to September 15th of 2024 are eligible to apply for a claim to get a share of $2.8 billion in revenue because they weren't paid during that time. So in a 6-month window, I don't understand what, I'm sorry, 8 month, 1 year, 8 year and 6 month window, 8 year and 6 month window. So if you play college sports in that 8 year window and 6 months, you can apply for damages and get your share of $2.8 billion that they did not pay you in the first place. Damn, I missed that by about a dozen years, 20. So, but that's the deal. So that's what's coming. I tell you what, it's, I will share the link on my socials. You can check that out yourself. Go to Recruit Boss on X and you can see me there, and look for it. And I'll share it there. Okay. Follow me on X. You can get us information. I'll update you with stuff as I learn it, but this is where we stand now. See, everything's in flux. Everything's in flux. It's still chaos. It was the Wild West a year ago. Now it's still the Wild West. It's just, they're trying to bring in a new sheriff, and we don't know if everyone's going to obey the rules. But they have no rules yet. They don't know them yet. They just have concepts of rules. All right, but they're working on it. We're seeing what they're going to try to do. NCAA is trying to get their control back. I'm curious to see what you have to say about this. Please comment below, comment on X. Let me know what you think. Ask questions if you have them. I'm here to answer them. It's very interesting. It's very, very interesting what's going on right now, and I'm having a good time with this. I will keep you posted. Until next time, I'm Matt Roberts. Know your goal.